As far as the circumcision goes, it is interesting. It is a ritual that God gave to the Jews to identify them as his people. And it was a symbolic kind of a thing, and symbolic of cutting away the flesh. In other words, they were to be a people who were after the things of the Spirit and not to be living after the things of the flesh. And so it was sort of a symbolic kind of a activity that showed, we're not going to be ruled by the flesh or governed by the flesh, but we want to be governed by the Spirit of God. And, of course, it was scheduled on a certain day after they were so many days old. And if you look at it, at that age, 8 days, on the 8th day, they were circumcised.
Well, factor K is not present in a baby's system until the 8th day, and that's the clotting factor.
Isn't that interesting?
Uh-huh.
God had a good reason for saying the 8th day. But then, if the 8th day fell on the Sabbath day, they could go ahead and perform the ritual on the Sabbath day, though so many other things were actually prohibited to be done on the Sabbath day.
Yeah, just briefly, God made several covenants in the book of Genesis. He made a covenant with Noah that applied to all of creation, and he made a covenant with Abraham, and he said, I'll be your God, you will be my people, and here's the sign of the covenant. Now, the sign of the covenant with Noah was the rainbow, but the sign of the covenant with Abraham was circumcision, and God said, every one of your male descendants will be circumcised, and the one who's not circumcised will be cut off from among his people. So what had happened is those children who had come out of Egypt had not been circumcised while they were in the wilderness. So before they entered the promised land, God wanted them circumcised. So many of them were grown adults by that time. And so that's the significance of the circumcision there in Joshua. It's like we have to have this covenant sign that we are God's people before we enter the land that he's promised us, because the promise of the land was all tied up in God's covenant with Abraham, and they had to be members of that covenant. And so that's the circumcision. I mean, there's an even stranger story in Exodus regarding Moses and his son who is not circumcised. And again, it's taking care of business, making sure that they were in covenant like they were supposed to.